Sometimes I think there are more X-Men games out there than actual X-Men, which is absurd because there's like hundreds, if not thousands of X-Men out there. But like Marvel's multitude of mutants, there are some games that are just more memorable than others. So the 10 you see here are the best that there's ever been. Hey, I'm Nervous Nick for Screw Attack's Top 10 X-Men games.
Number 10.
Yeah, I know what you're thinking. Game Gear, Nick? Really? But X-Men GAMEMASTER'S Legacy is the middle child of a trilogy, but it's a trilogy whose siblings are not so great. But this game is really great. There's something about playing games on a handheld that I think is taken for granted today. I mean, sure, it sacrifices design for portability, but X-Men games only need a few key things to succeed. Like all the characters, diverse levels, Wolverine, and as long as you had enough batteries, GAMEMASTER'S Legacy had it all. Cyclops, Storm, Wolverine, Gambit, Rogue, Bishop, Phoenix, and even Cable was a hidden figure in a pyramid. A pyramid in which you fight Apocalypse. And for a handheld, it was fun enough to keep you entertained on those long car trips. Characters had unique abilities, bosses were varied, and there were even these awesome character portraits in between levels. Now, where did I put those batteries?
Number 9.
Now wait a second, hold on, hear me out. You're right, this is not explicitly an X-Men game, but it is a game that features the X-Men. In fact, LEGO Marvel superheroes might have the largest roster on this list, especially if you count the villains. Combine that with its open world nature, and this is the X-Men game from the last generation. So if you've ever wanted to play the role of Iceman sliding around the city or Colossus roaring his way through downtown New York, there isn't a better game for you. And there's also flying the Blackbird, fighting Sentinels, and chilling with Wolverine. The story in this game is built around some of the greatest moments in X-Men history, not only taking you to Professor Xavier's school for gifted children, but letting you hover around as the mutant genius himself. Oh, you can also terrorize Central Park in your wheelchair by disintegrating hot dog carts with your mind? Checkmate, DC Comics.
Number 8.
Yes, you are looking at Quake, and yes, this is going somewhere, I promise. Quake was one of the early games that launched the PC modding community, and one of those mods is coming in at number 8. X-Men: The Ravages of Apocalypse is one of Quake's more memorable mods. As a twist, this game isn't about you being the X-Men, but rather killing the X-Men. Magneto has created some crazy cyborg whose hands can shapeshift into guns, and its mission is to destroy all the clones of the X-Men that Apocalypse created. It's got a strong roster, and although you're playing the role of this completely new character, there are so many nods that make this game feel like a true passion project. Like the fact that Wolverine always comes back to life after you kill him, and then he continues to hunt you down for the rest of the level. While it's a lesser known game, it is one of those really cool experiences that's rooted in what it means to be an X-Man.
Number 7.
Say what you will about Capcom, but when it comes to fighting games, they've always done a great job incorporating X-Men into the larger Capcom universe. Well, I mean, until they just didn't anymore, but X-Men vs. Street Fighter in particular is one of the more significant, if not the most significant, crossovers in video game history. Outside of the odd hidden character, a full-blown crossover game hadn't really been done like this before. X-Men vs. Street Fighter brought a crazy cast of fighting game characters matched up with amazing mutants, and all of them have their own unique powers. Thanks to the popularity of arcades in the 90s, this game was an instant hit, with its beautiful sprites, insane aerial combos, and team-based fighting, like the introduction of assist characters or the option of unleashing both hyper combos simultaneously. Thanks to its success, X-Men vs. Street Fighter would be at the forefront of a wave of crossover fighters that includes the GOAT, Marvel vs. Capcom 2. That's greatest of all time, in case you didn't know. Now that's the kind of legacy that makes a great X-Men game.
Number 6.
Even though Capcom's hands were busy with working on fighting games at the time, that didn't stop them from making an X-Men themed beat-em-up exclusively for SNES. X-Men Mutant Apocalypse had you playing as one of 5 X-Men, navigating a mix of character-specific levels and some awesome boss fights as well. It even had Street Fighter-style inputs to activate their mutant abilities. As a platform exclusive, there really weren't many X-Men games like it for its time, and it certainly was one of the best looking beat-em-ups on the Super Nintendo. Even better looking than Maximum Carnage, although I know we think of that game more fondly. It's also one of the few X-Men action games that lets you play as Beast, which is notable because, come on, it's Beast! The dude's one of the OG X-Men, and look, he can walk upside down. Okay, he's basically just Blanca in a beast skin, but still, how many X-Men games let you play as Blue Frazier?
Number 5.
One of the greatest ideas that came out of the 6th console generation were these team-based RPGs like X-Men Legends and Marvel Ultimate Alliance. But for X-Men fans, the one that did it best had to be X-Men Legends 2: Rise of Apocalypse. In it, you choose a team of 4 and switch between them in real time. It even had multiplayer, which led up to 3 buddies join in for co-op. With it being an RPG, you complete missions to earn experience, which you then use to make your mutants ridiculously OP. But what set Legends 2 apart from its predecessor is that it not only brought a stronger cast and better powers, but it also had the plot twist of the X-Men teaming up with the Brotherhood to defeat Apocalypse. A sort of ultimate alliance, if you will. I'll admit, though, the voice acting is pretty terrible.
Let's get one thing straight, Boy Scout. I don't take orders from you.
But you can't deny that this was and remains to this day the definitive RPG experience for X-Men fans.
Number 4.
I know plenty of you out there are like me and grew up as Nintendo fanboys who didn't give the poor Genesis too much of a chance. Sadly, you and I missed out on the Sega game simply called X-Men. Well, unless that kid up the street had it. You know, the kid that you pretended to be friends with because he had a Genesis. Anyway, X-Men on Genesis for me was my first encounter with the mutants on a home console. It had these huge sprites in this EB Games kiosk in the mall, and being a Wolverine fan, it called out to me. The first thing I had to try was to snict the claws in and out. Snicked, snicked, snicked. In that moment, I never wanted an X-Men game more. But it also had other greats like Gambit, Cyclops, and Nightcrawler, plus support characters like Storm and Archangel. And sure, the mutant powers were managed in a separate meter, including Wolverine's claws, but it was still a great X-Men experience altogether, especially for the home console market, which until that point had been total garbage. I'll put it this way, if I had a Genesis back in '93, this would have been one of my first purchases.
Number 3.
It's not often that the video game adaptation of a movie ends up being better than the source material, but that's exactly the case with X-Men Origins Wolverine. A third-person action game developed by Raven, it delivers on the often sought-after ultra-violence that Wolvie's known for. Other games and cartoons usually fail to capture his brutality, but in this movie tie-in of all things, they completely nailed it. Leaping across screens, tearing enemies apart, executing soldiers in the environment, or getting up close and personal. Soldiers are like food for Wolverine's fists, and Wolverine's fists are always hungry. Not only will their strategic dismemberment make you queasy, but Wolverine will take a fair share of damage himself. And while it's a game based on a movie, it actually dives deeper into Wolverine's backstory. Plus, it's got his classic costumes. Now, if only Raven got to make a sequel. I mean, the crappy movie got 2 of them. We are owed this, Raven.
Take a message to your boss.
Number 2.
Now, out of all the licensed arcade games, X-Men is not the most popular, but the arcade scene couldn't deny how memorable that 6-player arcade cabinet was. It was a beat-em-up so awesome, it needed 2 screens for the full experience. And it's gorgeous, too. The whole crew is there, including Dazzler. Probably a bad choice in retrospect, but we still had Nightcrawler, Wolverine, Cyclops, Storm, and Colossus. Speaking of which, if you went to MagFest back in the day, Colossus's roar probably sounds familiar. X-Men Arcade is just a perfect X-Men story, with a colorful cast of characters fighting villains who welcome you to die.
Welcome to die.
And almost nothing else in the X-Men Compendium feels like X-Men Arcade, making it a unique experience that's also easy to play. With it being big enough for 6 players, the whole game feels massive as you and your friends are X-Men off to beat the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. Hey, editor, one more Colossus roar for the road.
It's number 1.
Professor X originally started the X-Men in part to protect the world from the machinations of crazed mutants, so that requires the team to, get in a lot of fights. So of course, the #1 X-Men game would be devoted to fighting. X-Men Children of the Atom completely delivers on the childhood fantasy of which mutants would win in a fight. It also lets you duke it out with baddies like Silver Samurai or a Sentinel. The dude's huge! And for the time period, it was definitely the best looking fighter on the market. It sure was experimental and a little janky, but for fans of the X-Men to get a chance to Berserker Barrage through Omega Red, oh, there's no better game for you. But let's also not forget that were it not for Children of the Atom's success, we wouldn't have seen nearly as many X-Men in fighting games, or even just Marvel characters as a whole. God bless you, Capcom. Our secret number 11 goes to X-Men 2 Clone Wars for Genesis. This gem features huge sprites and awesome characters, but oddly enough, no stage select screen. You just get dumped into a level at random, and if you don't get the one you want, you gotta hit reset until you do. Still, we can't help but love it.